Uh, so Tim Stroud and I actually, we do go way back. We've been friends for a long time, and Tim, please just give me a thumbs up that you can hear me okay and everything's fine. Okay, great. Um, and he did ask me if I would share my experience, not just from a veteran's perspective, and that is something that I do kind of bring or unique thing that I bring to the group today is yes, I understand what it's like to kind of, enter the world and, kind of like, well, now what am I going to do with the rest of my life kind of thing. But also, what the power for kind of storytelling really is. It's not just about, you know, some of the things that we may have done or some of the things that we imagine. And it could be business success. It could be a leadership story. But the power of storytelling really does connect us. It builds relationships and shares a lot with the world. So it's one of the unique things that separates us as humans and makes us interesting to each other. So with that, I'll just do a quick little intro of myself. As Tim had shared, I am a award-winning author. It sounds weird to say that, but I did write. I started writing years ago as a ghostwriter for some tech startups. I'd been in marketing and advertising for over 20 years. And, I'd kind of done some, helped some CEOs write some kind of memoirs, but ghostwriting is a lot different. It's more of a process of you kind of get hired to or contracted to kind of provide a manuscript on a certain topic, and you kind of turn it over. And I really didn't know anything about that publishing process because my part was done. Once you hand it off, it's, your name's not associated with it. It's done. Uh, then COVID happened, and I was at home and like a lot of Americans were, and I was basically kind of like, well, what do I do now? And my wife was like, well, you could either learn how to bake sourdough, or you could learn how to play guitar, or you could write the book you've been talking about. And so I chose the latter and I started writing novels. So today, what I'd like to share with everyone is what I experienced kind of bashing into or bashing through the publishing process. Um, I'd say naively, but also kind of in a way that it's the only way I knew how. I didn't take a creative writing class. I knew nothing about the publishing industry, but I figured I might as well just get started because I also knowing myself that I could put hurdles in front of myself and say, hey, oh, nobody's gonna like it, or oh, what if nobody reads it? Well, what if this happens? And then I decided to flip that narrative and say, well, what if people like it? And what if people are entertained by it? And so that's what kind of inspired this, and I hope to share this with you today. Please put any questions or anything in the chat along the way, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But with that, I will kick this thing off and say this is the agenda for the program today. And it's really kind of just a general overview, right? Because there's so much to share, and there's so much for me to still learn. But I figured that if we could just kind of start with the high level before we kind of got into the weeds on certain things, like developing a manuscript, it's kind of its own class, if you will, and marketing your book is kind of its own class. But it helps to kind of, from my perspective, to kind of see the big picture before you kind of see all the little pieces that also play a part. So these are the items that we'll be talking about today. And I'll just kick it off with getting started because instead of reading the slide to you, that's where we start. We're going to start with getting started. So what is your story? Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a story. It's a matter of what type of story are you looking to tell, and how do you think it'll resonate with the people that you think it'll connect with? Mostly people like yourself. If you're if there's a particular topic or area of interest, um, that's usually there's probably dozens of people that share that same interest. If you've ever been to Comic-Con or if you've ever been to um, any kind of film festival or something where you know, there's a gathering of people that all have a very similar interest. Yes, it does break down into little niches and genres, but at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do when you get started is you're thinking about this from a perspective of, am I writing like a business case? Am I kind of using this as kind of like a leap, or I would say a business card, if you will, a business book that can help me get on TED Talks or help me get, kind of recognized in the world? Or is this story going to be something that's like a legacy that I can pass down to my family, my children, and so on? And the only thing I'll say about that and add to that is just getting published, you've already created a legacy. You already have something out there with your name on it as an author, and it is something that will last and be shared over time. But getting started is always that first step. So the second one, when you really kind of think about it, is defining your product, right? We're talking about categories here. We're talking about where does my story fit? Is it going to be in the nonfiction? Typically the top two categories are nonfiction and fiction. With nonfiction, you're definitely more into there's going to be a lot of research. You're probably going to be proving some kind of thesis or some kind of hypothesis. Um, or there's going to be some data that needs to be supported, but you're definitely going into a nonfiction route where the facts are really kind of what kind of supports and drives the story and the telling of that, versus fiction, where yes, you still have to do some research, but it's only limited by your imagination. You can share whatever story you want. You can build, an imaginary world with characters, especially in the kind of the fantasy genre or horror or things like that. But also just historical fiction where my novels happen to kind of take place or how they're kind of categorized. But you're really kind of doing things from a fictional narrative. And they are just distinctly different because they do have arguably distinctly different workflows. But, beyond getting started, the next step is, okay, what's my product and how am I going to kind of categorize it? Because the following step for that is, what's going to be my day one marketing strategy as an author? And the day one strategy is to really, if you've ever started a project and you kind of see the end in sight and you say, oh, we're going to remodel the kitchen, and at the end of the kitchen it's going to look beautiful, but we need to get it done before Thanksgiving this year. So to do that, you need to work backwards. You need to work backwards in time to say, well, to get it done by Thanksgiving, we need to start, the demo and the this and and you kind of start parsing out. The exact same thing will happen with a book strategy. And knowing how you're going to market it on day one is probably the biggest thing that I learned retroactively. And I would encourage you to think about it as you embark on this journey, because it goes back to knowing who your target audience is and who's going to enjoy what you put between what you put between the cover. So that really kind of lends to research being everything. Heavy on the nonfiction, so you have to have it on nonfiction. But with fiction, still, if you're going to do historical fiction, so my books are a Western. It's a historical fiction Western. So the research that I had to do was, okay, I'm gonna do some, world building around, post Civil War. So what I really wanted to know was, okay, was the railroad kind of coming through this part of the country at a certain time? What was kind of happening around at a certain time? What historical events kind of helped shape my story and kind of frame it? But research is a huge piece of it, but it also kind of aligns those interests, right? Because people that are going to be into from my person for my books, it's who's going to be interested in post Civil War westerns, or who likes spaghetti western, movies and Clint Eastwood movies, and how many people will even like the genre? How many people like westerns and still read westerns, or read horror, or read science fiction, or read so you have to think through those things, because it's not just the piece of like, okay, again, like what I'm going to write, but again, how many people are going to be able to kind of find it, read it? Um, is there something like that out there already? And is it, and that's not a bad thing, because it actually says if there is something out there and it's popular, then you have something to kind of position against. You can be, it's okay to draw comparative models. And, I often say the Samurai Cowboy series is like John Wick meets The Last Samurai, um, kind of meets spaghetti westerns. I'm trying to give people a frame of reference that they can understand. When you talk to people that about your book, and you kind of give them something that at least it's tangible. But again, something out there is a good thing, but it's also going to really make sure that when you're working on your title, and why yours is different. So with your title, you really have to think about how are people going to find it once it's out there. And I would encourage, like, as you kind of go through your working title, like, your working title, your working draft of your manuscript, go on Google, go on Amazon, go on and basically search anything that may have a similar title or something, uh, and I could tell you just anecdotally, when I chose my title for my books, I couldn't call it Way of the Samurai, because if you type in Way of the Samurai, you would just be buried. I would have been buried in 100 other results, and never would have surfaced. But you want to know those keywords, and you want to know how those things are going to play into that search component. And then ultimately, yeah, who would buy it? Where would they buy it? Why would they buy it? And again, knowing your target audience. For mine, my age range is typically it's skewed young adult. So mine's 13 plus. You should know the percentage male or female. Sometimes you won't know until you get the book out there. And then yes, how many enthusiasts follow that genre? Because I can tell you again, as learned from experience, as a new author, readers follow genre first and then authors second. So people that like horror may eventually like Stephen King, but people won't like Stephen King if they don't already like horror. So I hope that makes sense, but it's really kind of knowing that kind of that genre and that differentiation. So here's I don't know if you can see my Cade Wilson here. So Cade Wilson is my character. And as we talk about creating an outline, this is kind of the creative piece, the fun part, the part where you can kind of say, okay, going back to kind of the fictional side, who are my characters are going to be? What are their names going to be? But what time period is this? Who's my protagonist? Who's my antagonist? How many chapters are going to be there? World building is still a very big piece of it. And, and when we talk about world building, there's even some world building in nonfiction or business books, because you want the reader to kind of understand the context of which to take your story. If you're telling a story of entrepreneurship, your world building is, how did I get there? Oh, and I misspelled building. And ultimately, what's the problem? How did I solve it? Why this? Why now? And the hypothesis or the proof behind you know, what you're trying to prove, but it helps to kind of help people to understand the world that you're building. And the fictional side of things, you're really trying to understand, like, okay, if Dune is kind of, and Star Wars are over here as far as world building, you know, as a Western, I didn't really have to do too much world building because I don't have to explain to anybody what a horse is, or, you know, or what a cowboy is, um, versus, you know, others that, you know, if you're really trying to kind of create something in the sci-fi world, you have to start from scratch and literally kind of layer it. And so everyone can kind of follow and understand. But you don't want to ever confuse your readers from the point of view perspective. So when you're doing your storytelling, whether you do it in first person or third person, it's essential that if you change a point of view, or if you want a different character to have a different point of view, or you want to expose a different point of view from one of your other characters, that you're very clear about how you do that. Um, the way that I did it was I used sub chapters to change point of view between the characters, because I wanted to build kind of like this universe, if you will, around my samurai cowboys. And you know, and Cade here as my, you know, my guy. He's only one of three samurai cowboys, but I had a visual of what I imagined Cade would look like, and ultimately, you know, the way he would kind of carry himself, and you describe those things. But when you're really doing character development, it's you got to get. I think these are the four essentials. Who are they? Okay, who are? What's their name? What do they do? What's their purpose? Like, what in life? Like, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And part of their story arc, like, what's the thing? What's the one thing that's kind of driving them? Why should the reader care? Like, why should I even like follow this guy? Why do I, you know, it's like there has to be some kind of emotional hook or something that pulls the reader in. And then at the end of the day, can the reader feel it? Can you make them feel it? And the best example of that is that I can think of is um, I've done presentations at book clubs, and I've done book signings, and people often come and go, "Oh man," but they'll say, "Oh, it broke my heart when this character died," and I'm like, "Oh," I'm like, "That's great,
Hold it. Yeah.
that's amazing." It's like, because if they died, it's like you felt it. It's like there was something, like it was visceral, and you know, it's like you had a connection to that person. And I know that that isn't necessarily what they wanted to hear, but you know, it's something that, you know, you've at least touched that nerve when a reader says like, oh yeah, I'm totally like, you know, I'm upset by something that you did, or you know, that person's dead. But yeah, um, the outline is very important. So now let's just go, and I'm sorry, I'm just moving stuff around here. So time on page is what authors call. So you know, the funny thing is about, you know, when I entered this world of authors, and I joined Writers Digest, and I joined these little networks, and there's like, there are networks within networks, you know, kind of like, you know, there's Facebook, and there's, you know, there's Instagram, but you can still have groups, and you can have subgroups. And um, the funny thing is like the more that you talk to other authors, and the more that you share like your, you know, pains, lessons learned, things that you're doing. Here's one thing that I found that we all had in common. So what I posted on this is, you know, kind of a generalized statement, but it seems to ring true. Time on page is the actual time that a writer spends writing. You will spend so much more time doing research, publishing, rewrites, marketing, book events, you know, getting out there and talking about your book, because you know, everyone should know. If you wrote a book, tell everyone. My publisher says you have to be, you know, just absolutely just a shameless self promoter to some degree, to just continue to put it out there in the world. But only 40% of your time is time that you're going to actually spend writing, and that is even a percentage of time in your day because writing's typically a side hustle for most people. Unless you're working in the traditional or you have a traditional publisher and you're getting paid to just churn out stories, you're going to be doing this on the side, and you're going to be doing it on weekends and nights, and you're going to have family and football games and work and your day job and other things like that. So um, writing can be a hobby or it can be a business, but you'll definitely have to make time for both, and it's absolutely something you should consider as you're starting your author journey.
Hey, Nate, quick question for you. I know we've got some questions already from the group here. Do you want us to save those to the end or just some kind of salt and pepper those insides so they're more germane?
To the end, please.
You got it. Thank you.
So this is the busiest slide I have, and I'm really sorry, but I wanted to kind of give it I wanted to kind of show you that, like, look, this is kind of everything that goes into it, and try to break it down as best as possible in some kind of step phase. So phase one, or step one, kind of what we talked about earlier, defining your product. What's your product? Because at the end of the day, a book is really product marketing. You're trying to find somebody that wants to buy your product. And the better you can define it before you even get started, or as you get started, excuse me, the better, because it's really going to help you with the next steps, which, okay, now that I have my product, how much research do I need to do to support that? That working title is so important because it usually kind of gives us something like, okay, this is the working title. You can tell your friends about it, get it excited, and they start to kind of generate some interest. But it may not be your finished title. So just keep it a working title as you start your outline. But when that outline to your manuscript draft is really kind of, the two dots that need to connect there are as you outline, try to be as deliberate as possible in kind of structuring how you're going to kind of write your book and how you want to chapterize it and how you want to get it to, how you want it to flow. This second step, confirming the title. Once you really have a good idea of like your manuscript's done and you feel like there's a thing, like you feel like confident, like you can, start to kind of share it around. And that's why there's an asterisk by the draft. It's like when you start to really feel like you have something you can share, because until then you really have nothing. You just have kind of an idea. Until you have about 10,000 words or more, that's when you have a true draft that typically, publishers want to see. There are some around that you could do 5,000, but that's short story stuff, and it's typically, again, in the self-publishing realm. Confirming your title. Once you've really kind of confirmed your title, you can compile that manuscript, and then you can send it to copyright.gov. Copyright.gov, it's about $90 to do that, to basically submit a PDF of your manuscript with the title, you as the author, and that way you feel protected, and you can find out, like, now you can start shopping it around and find an editor or publisher. Finding an editor or a publisher are this is probably the single biggest thing here, because you want an editor that really gets you and understands your story and understands how to make your product the best it can be. Same thing with a publisher. And I can tell you just really quickly, a traditional publisher, unless you're famous and you're wanting to write a business book, or you're already an athlete and you're writing, your memoirs or something, it's like a traditional publisher will not do a one-off book deal. They'll want to see, like, okay, I want to see, if it's a series, like mine was a series, a 3-book series. Well, they would say, well, come to us when your series is done. They want to see all 3 in the series. They don't want to see book 1. They want to see books 1, 2, and 3 and see that it's marketable, and then they'll work with you. So that's why a lot kind of go the self-publishing route. And you can still find hybrid publishers that you kind of pay a little a fee for service to help, let them help you and get with the cover art, with things like, formatting and getting on Amazon. But that's what the route most authors take nowadays. And, Amazon and Ingram Spark are avenues that really kind of allow for that. Step 3, your story editor. So my story editor is actually a guy out of the UK. When I had my manuscript in hand and I was shopping it around trying to find an editor, it's like, okay, I went to the first one, I did some Google research, and first gal was like, oh, no, that sounds great, but I only do romance. You should talk to this person. So then I go to this person. They're like, oh, that's really cool, but I only do sci-fi. And you're like, okay, well, and then, you go from there to, they just, put you onto somebody, put you onto somebody. By the 5th person, I finally met this guy, and he's actually in England, um, and he's into fantasy, but he really likes samurai. He had an affinity for it, like I did, and so he was easy to work with, and he gave me the best advice I could possibly get because he was such a dry. The British sense of humor, he's just so dry. It was just very much like, hey, this is what you did well, this is everything you need to fix. And I needed to listen to it because I needed to hear it. But having a good story editor will absolutely help you out and help you to be successful. When you get that back from your editor, you'll do your first rewrite. You'll get all the comments, everything that they think you should change, and you will do the first rewrite of your manuscript. And that's typically, after that, is when you want to look for your first beta readers. Your first beta readers are going to be friends and family that are close to you, probably about 10, that are going to read it and read it quickly and get you feedback as quickly as possible. But what you're just kind of looking for is like, hey, does the story make sense? Does it flow? Is this what you anticipated? Is this what you expected, based on the first book or the second one? But those beta readers, those first beta readers, small sample size, good feedback. The second one, when you've got that, you go to your copy editor or your proofreading editor, it's called, where now they just do grammar. They just go through, it's all grammar check, it's all punctuation, it's basically the fastest one, or fastest phase that goes. And your second rewrite will be incorporating all those changes. But that second beta reader group should now be a broader circle. It should be, something to where it's like you have now about 50 readers and, friends that are like fans and people that have really wanted to be kind of one of your beta readers, they volunteered, and they're going to be passionate about it, and they're going to give you the kind of feedback that you need to make sure that your product is going to be the best that it can be. The 5th step, when you hit your publisher or work with your publisher, you're going to figure out your launch date, and you're going to work backwards from there. You're going to do your cover art, you're going to do your formatting, you're going to start to do all the little project management stuff that you need to kind of like push through, and it's going to take time, but your publisher is going to guide that process. Then you go to process 6, where it's the final review. You're going to basically, okay, this is what the book is going to kind of look like in its finished state. This is how many pages it is. Is it 5 by 8? Is it 6 by 9? How thin is it going to be? What color is the paper going to be? What do you want the font to be? That's the things that you're going to be looking for in that final review. You're going to approve that cover, and then you're going to have that brief description on the back that everybody's going to read and wants to pick up your book and buy it. Once you, again, with your launch date, now you're just forward focused on the launch date, getting it out there. You should have your category research in hand. Like, what categories do you want to be in when you're on Amazon? You're listed in, books, fiction, Western, historical fiction, or young adult, or military, or military history. Whatever those are, it's like you're going to want to make sure you get 3 categories on Amazon. You used to do 10, now you do 3, because they're really trying to dial in. So you really want to nail like where your book fits, and you want to start your initial marketing. If you have social media profiles, if you've got something that's, again, if you wrote something, tell everybody about it, and then push towards final 8, which is your big launch, your big distribution. that's where you kick in your marketing strategy, and you're really telling everybody about it. And most importantly, as funny as this is going to sound, get reviews. Get as many reviews as you can, because Amazon loves reviews and people want to see them before they'll buy your book or read it, typically, especially if they don't know you. And so it's really important to get those and try to solicit as many of those as you can, as soon as you can. So now we're going to talk about expectations. This isn't meant to discourage anybody. It's actually meant to encourage. But I wanted everybody in attending today to kind of have a realistic perspective of what those real numbers are. My son says he wants to play football maybe in college or something. It's like, well, okay, this is how many kids get selected to move up. So, you're playing real numbers here. These are real numbers. On average, from the publishing process, from start to finish, can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. 6 months to a year. And that includes the writing piece and the rewrites and the process and everything that we just discussed in the busy slide. The other numbers are, it's going to probably take about $3,000. The asterisk is for, like, it can be 2, it could be 4, it could be more if you want to spend more on marketing. But there are certain things that just cost money. It costs money to have an Amazon KDP account. It costs a little bit to open up your Ingham Spark account, to be on Crave Books, to be on, Goodreads, to join all these different groups where you want to have your book distributed. The average number of books sold by an independent author is about 250. It's, again, not meant to discourage. It's just, it's it could be a niche audience thing, but for the most part, your story has to be really compelling. And the more work that you do will help you along the way. And all those previous steps will help you surpass that number. And we can talk about that at the end as well. 81%. So this is a friend of mine. He said, if you took 100 people in a room and said, hey, who wants to write a book? About 81% would raise their hand. But about only 8% will actually follow through, do what it takes, finish the product and become an author. So it really is kind of some rare air when you think about kind of that legacy piece and whatever you're getting published. But when you get to join the 8% club, it's a pretty cool thing. So the last thing that you want to create as part of your publishing process is your persona. So just for fun, I put my 2 personas. So on one side of the world, I'm Nathan J. Wagner. I'm a healthcare consultant, ghostwriter. I basically I help healthcare companies, improve their customer and patient experience. But at the same time, my side hustle is I'm this award-winning author over here, Nate Wagner. My wife makes a joke. She's like, honey, you're like Clark Kent. It's like, oh, here's your big disguise. It's like, oh, no, I'm Nate Wagner. His glasses on. Oh, and then without him, it's like, but they really are kind of separate worlds, and they really, I would say be careful how they touch each other. If you write a business book, obviously that changes in the LinkedIn space and on Twitter. It's like, yeah, you can absolutely kind of integrate it into who you are and leads to your business. But if not, and if you're writing fiction or if you're writing romance, or even if it's a little racy, as some of my friends write some racy romance novels, yeah, they just create a whole different name, whole different author name, whole different persona. And, basically, including TikTok and Instagram and social media profiles, it's really kind of separating the two. And it really is, it's purposeful and strategic to do so. So with that, I just wanted to, again, give you kind of this big splash overview. I know we covered a lot of material in the 30 minutes. And at this point, I know that we got off to a rocky start, so I'm just going to jump straight to questions and go from there.
Dave, thank you so much. I'm gonna come to the front of the room and help field some questions for you. And I did not get Nate the introduction that he deserved. He is an amazing friend and a great veteran. Nate, how tall are you? 6'4"?
6'5".
So we're about the same height. Got it. Jim, how tall are you? 4'2"?
I was 6'4" until I went in the army, then 6'3".
Yeah, he's got, and he and his wife have kids that are 6'13" and 6'15", is that right? Yeah. Close enough. I'm never good at that. But with that, talking with Nate behind the scenes, there has not been another time in the history of our lives to be an author now because of everything that's available to us online, stories that we can share, doing the research that was quickly, because before you would have to use the new decimal system. You'd have to go to the library, do the research, see what's there, try the library or free and say, great, what's moving off the shelf, what can I put out there? Now you can do your own research, you can tell your story. And that's why when you said about finding your voice, seriously, get into it, have some fun with it. Your voice would be different. Well, if you're like, hey, am I going to use my voice? I'm not a public speaker, because that needs to resonate with your readers as well when they're turning pages or listening to your audiobook, because David Goggins is going to sound different than David Letterman or Dave Chappelle. So which voice do you want to use, right? And then start doing the things that he said of just taking that first step, because we have some amazing stories. Check your Purple Heart recipient, been with your arm for what, a year and a half? 3 years, you couldn't move your left arm. And you've got Donnie over here, still got a bullet in his head, bragging to everybody. You have 2 Vietnam veterans, and you started where? Afghanistan. We all have stories to tell, and stories to sell. And those, you may think, nobody wants to hear it. Well, it may be a similar story to someone else's, but you just tell it in such a entertaining fashion that's out there. Quick aside for David Goggins, if you haven't read his book as well, the reason I was telling David and I'm talking about it is because not only is it is a good book, the audio version, and that's another thing that Nate will take you through in another class. It is getting to that level to where you do the audio books, but you somebody totally different reading your book, filling in that voice, and you're just filling it in the gaps. And so I know we have some people here that have been willing to take that step forward. What's your question? Because I know that you've got about 12 books right here. You're a public speaker, you've been in Rotary, you've been a district governor, you've been the president of our 3 clubs, 17 times. But what is your question for Nate?
I think you started beyond once upon a time.
So he asked, so after Once Upon a Time, how do you keep yourself motivated, and what are the words to fill in? How do you find that motivation?
I'm sorry, Tim, I kind of broke up on you. What was it? What keeps me motivated?
Well, and so Bob has some great stories to tell from his time in the Navy, just like you do, and he wants to incorporate those into lessons and all the leadership. But he's got so many different stories. After he starts with Once Upon a Time, he doesn't have that. So how does he break that monumental task of filling out 10,000 words? Where does he go?
Okay.
Okay, 1 second, Nate.
When you don't like it.
Oh, when you don't like to write.
So they have scripting tools where you can just speak into a narrative, or you can hire a ghostwriter and basically just get interviewed. That's what I used to do. And I would just sit and say, hey, what's on your mind? What would you like to share with the world? And then I'd just take notes and then hand them back over. But when you have so many different stories, and I can relate to that, because where do you start? A parent analogy, or if you have pets, it's like, there's always one that's like, that's hungry at the time, or is the one that's like the most pressing, the one that's like begging for attention. It's like, usually that's the place to start. Go with the one that like is demanding the most of your attention at the time, because it's kind of like the way I see that it's your subconscious saying like, this is where to start.
Thank you, Nate. Bob, for me, when I give my speeches, I tend to record them on something different than my phone. Because my phone, I'm trying to take pictures or videos. So I bought this recording device to say, it has served me well because it's multi-directional. When I want to record notes or anything, I think it's funny. So I'll do that and I'll play it back like, no, that wasn't funny. Yeah, it's a lot. That is a lot. I delete a lot. Or I just pull on that thread. But all of us were told to journal while we were in the military or when we transitioned out. Some did, some didn't. But that's another good place to go review your notes that you've taken and like, wow, and then start talking to your friends like Nate said, and find out which stories people are reading in. Like, that's pretty interesting. Just get that bolt in your head, Donnie, and what's going on? Any questions?
So the only question, one of the interesting points was the beta reader. And that is, you mentioned having, people that were close to you become beta readers for you. Do you have to pay for the second group of beta readers that are a lot more advanced, more passionate about the topic, possibly about the author? Does that have a cost associated with it for people to be beta readers for you?
So I would say the short answer is no. Your first group of beta readers should be the people that you think are going to be the closest to you, because at the end of the day, and everything that stay tuned for veterans is doing, it's like anything artistic or creative is a personal endeavor, right? So you're kind of putting a piece of you out there in the world and kind of saying, hey, check this out. So you want to make sure that like you try that with, you do it with, family members, really close friends, but people that are going to kind of get you and kind of understand what you were trying to accomplish by kind of telling this story or writing the book. Your second group can just be a broader group of friends. Like if you belong to a subgroup on like, again, on a social media channel like Facebook, like I'm part, like my USS Cushing group, right? Like I could say, hey, shipmates, hey, I wrote this book, and you can like check this out. It's, I'll email you for free, but make sure that you kind of, it doesn't have to be 50, it can be 20, it can be 30. What you need is people that will read it and actually get back to you with feedback. It should be free. You shouldn't have to pay for it. But what you really need, what the real value there is just having somebody that may know you, but is kind of reading it objectively. And that's the feedback you're getting. That's going to be a little distinctly different from somebody that's really close to you and may want to protect your feelings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And while we're waiting on our next question from inside the room, Amber, do we have any people with questions online? By the way, Amber's in Germany 7 hours in the future.
Versus in the bathroom and
Yeah, exactly. Amber's still there? Maybe not. Do we have any questions online?
No, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, thank you, Nate.
the question audience.
Any from our other Vietnam veterans? Yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly. Questions for Becker?
Yeah, this is what the script.
Nate, what are some of the scripting tools that you would recommend?
I try to be technology agnostic. I know that Dragon is one. I know that they typically, it's more used professionally. I haven't looked at it into any necessarily for myself because I just type as I go. But I'm getting older. My eyesight sucks, and I've thought about exploring those scripting tools. I know they exist. I might be able to talk more about that in another class, but let me put that down because right now I don't have any that I would recommend.
Okay, we have Patrick out. He had a question, and while I'm waiting for him to unmute, would you share your thoughts about utilizing AI either to write or fill in gaps?
So that is a very interesting question because AI and scripting kind of go hand in hand. They have gotten they're getting to a place where you can start to kind of narrate where they're not at is kind of in the nuance or the kind of what the emotions are being felt. I'll give you an example. Amazon gave me a free audio version of book 2. They said, "Hey, you won some kind of sweepstakes or something. We're gonna test out this AI audio offering." And you got to choose one of 10 voices, and kind of like the pace of the thing. But at the end of the day, they're not going to necessarily have the again kind of the emotional hook or the kind of the nuancy kind of feelings. If you really want to kind of share something deeper, it's just gonna read the story just as it sounds, just like this. So
Oh, that's all. And people, I think you and I have talked offline about this one, is that get it out of your head that you have to cross the Grand Canyon for your first book. It can just be jumping over a small creek, pulling an Eagle Knievel or a Fonzarelli. But two people look at that and they look at that great divide and they say, I can't get across that. And they don't have to face it. Your first novel is probably gonna suck, but that's okay. But you need to get that underneath your belt, even if you're self-publishing, so you can get to that third series. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree with you, Tim. In fact, first manuscript of book 1 sucked. It sucked so bad that I'm embarrassed. I think I still have a copy of it somewhere, but you know, knowing again, charging into publishing without knowing really anything about it, or writing about point of view, or learning about point of view, and what editors call head hopping, where it's like you're bouncing around
Right.
and you're confusing. Your first draft is going to not be your best product, but it's just getting that out of your head. It's so, I'm telling you, hear me now, believe me later. It is so cathartic to just get it out of your head and to have something and to start sharing it, because people will ask about it and people will want to know, they'll want to dive deeper into certain things, and it'll just keep pulling more out of it. And then you'll say, oh, I should add a piece like that. Oh, I should talk about that. That it's all very positive if you open yourself up to that initial feedback and you don't let your ego kind of hold you back. And then just, make the next version better.
Gotcha. We had Patrick online, and I think he had to go because of business, but I'll find out what question he had for you, Nate, and we'll get that back to you. I want to segue into marketing. Are there any marketing tips and tricks that you can share with the group? And with that one, let me give it part 2. Looking at any of the trends that are coming out 6 months after you're supposed to launch your book, can you integrate those, or should you stay away? Such as Wolverine versus Deadpool is going to be the largest movie this year. It's going to gross over $1 billion. Can you integrate some of that stuff into your book? Will you get slammed with copyright, or it's an election year? Should you write something about Biden or Trump, or should you stay away?
So marketing is really a big, I would say probably one of the biggest things that you should think about when you're writing your book. As far as trends, absolutely. If it's a topical piece, or if it's something or if it's satirical, you want to make sure that you're on pace with the trends. That's why I never wrote a business book. I think I tried writing 3 business books about marketing, but by the time I finally got something on paper, like that trend had already passed. Like, okay, great. I'm writing about uh, I'm writing about YouTube, and now TikTok has emerged, and now or if I'm writing about email marketing, and now something else has emerged. But with other things, I would say if it's a business book and it's a marketing piece, you absolutely want to make sure that it ties into your brand or the brand of you or whatever it is that your business as an entrepreneur. If it's a fictional piece, it absolutely helps my book be successful, the Samurai Cowboy series, with just the emerging trends of, like, westerns are kind of back. you know, like Yellowstone and the popularity of that, and Shogun just did their miniseries relaunch again, and you know, when I make that connection to John Wick, it's like, oh, a lot of people love John Wick, but they draw that connection in the sense that, like, you know, my protagonist is an orphan of the Civil War, and he got trained to be this killer, and this, you know, this samurai warrior, and you know, and everything was, you know, his world was what it was until he decided he wanted out. And you know, that's what created the conflict. Is, you know, it's easy to get in sometimes, or hard to get in, but it's even harder to get out. So, you know,
Thank you,
seeing
Nate.
what's kind of out there, it really helps.
I always like to reward our classmates as we're on. Thank you for your time today. And it doesn't matter if you're online or in person. If you're online, if you're in the Houston area, you're eligible for this, as well as everybody in the room. Just a quick trivia check on learning. And thanks to Sarah Goffenbaum for getting us a $20 gift certificate to Luna's Mexican restaurant. I'm looking forward to eating there. Anybody else eaten at Luna's yet? Besides Donnie. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. So what is the name of the character of the samurai that he was talking about in his book? What's there?
Oh, I just,
Yeah, I totally butchered that. Didn't I?
the Cowboys.
The Cowboy Samurai. What's the name of the Cowboy Samurai? Dun, 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 dun. 3 letters.
Yeah.
Nate, what's the name?
The name's Cade Wilson.
I totally missed it too. Gabe?
Cade,
How you spell it?
Cade.
Hey, Dave, there we go. There we
Cade
go.
Wilson.
All right, so secondary question, what percentage of the time that he broke down would you actually spend writing your book? 40%, that's correct, so. Congratulations, we got worth the drive over here, right? Thanks so much.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, any last minute questions for Nate? He's gonna provide some other ones for us, and if you have any questions, you can email info@staytunedforvets.org, and Amber will get those out to Nate. And then put it out to the group to make sure that we are visiting properly. I'm hoping that somebody uses this as a catalyst. This is your springboard to tell your story, to find your voice. Whether you go to print or you just journal the Jesus out of your time, and you're putting that on your calendar. I don't care if it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes a day, but just being mindful, writing things down. Because I'm working with Bob and the Greater Houston Veterans Rotary Club, and with Patrick that's on there. He and another member are the ones without the catalyst. We're recording stories of our World War II, Korean, and our Vietnam veterans, and we're sending those to the Library of Congress so we can save those forever. I would love to see those stories in print, so now we can actually get those somebody. I know I'm like a lot of us, we have busy lives, love audiobooks, I love books on tape and all kinds of stuff, but there's something about turning the page and reading that book. I still love that. Nate, do you have any questions for the group?
No, I in the interest of time, I know I know I need to get on, but I did leave this up. So going back to day one marketing strategies. So when I came up with the title of my series, so the series is my product. The Samurai Cowboys is the product. Books 1 and 2 are, you know, kind of like the subset of that product. They're like variations of the product, like Star Wars, you know, and New Hope is one, and Empire Strikes Back is and Return of the Jedi. So that's kind of the same premise. But as soon as I knew what my title was going to be, or what the series was, I went and looked for that URL, and I found the SamuraiCowboys.com, and I registered it, and then I created this website specifically just to promote the series, and link to my Amazon page where you can buy it. And, you know, these are the things, you know, when you think about, like, again, kind of like, what's that title going to be, and how am I going to work that into getting that done? And I would say that, you know, to echo what Tim had shared, that I just launched book 1 January of last year, 2023. Book 2 came out in October of 2023. Book 3 will come out this year, and you know, I've sold 4,500 copies, so I'm doing pretty well for my first year. With you know, just book 1, and you know, winning an award is huge because it's a third party person said, oh yeah, this is good. It wasn't just my mom saying she liked the book. But it's so important that you really kind of think through those things, because it really does matter. And I invite you, yeah, everyone to, you know, this is my shameless plug. Please go to thesamuraicowboys.com and check it out.
Excellent. I've actually read his first book. I was impressed, and that's why we started talking. We have been taking a class today from Nate Wagner, U.S. Navy veteran, author of the Samurai Cowboys. Nate, thank you again for your time today, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome, Tim, and thank you all for attending. I definitely appreciate you making the time.
Take care, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, cheers.
So,